I love coffee. I love passively losing weight. It's just awesome, and that's what today's paper is about. So welcome to Journal Club with Greg Fridman. That's me. So today's paper is published in a fairly respected journal. The title is very long. Appraisal of the causal effect of plasma caffeine on fatness, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Oh boy. Well, I love medical journals. They give you a very short summary, and I really like this journal. This is very cool. What is already known on this topic? Small short-term trials have shown that caffeine intake results in weight and fat mass reduction, but the long-term effects of caffeine intake is unknown. Drink coffee, lose weight. That's it. That's today's paper. We're done. Details to follow. Consumption of coffee, a rich source of caffeine, is observationally associated with a lower risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. What this study adds: genetically predicted lifelong higher plasma caffeine concentrations were associated with lower body mass index and fat mass, as well as lower risk of type 2 diabetes. Approximately half of the effect of caffeine on type 2 diabetes was estimated to be mediated through body mass index reduction. The approach of this paper is quite interesting. They didn't do a clinical trial. Cheers. I'm losing some weight here. Instead, they analyzed available genetic data and linked it with heart disease and diabetes. So let's dive right in. Considering the extensive intake of caffeine worldwide, even if small metabolic effects could have important health implications. Think about this one for a second. I drink coffee. I don't do soft drinks. For me, it's just water and coffee. I do drink a lot of coffee, maybe 4 or 5 cups a day, and they're 12-ounce cups. So yeah, I know that's a bunch, or is it? Jury's still out on that one, but there are soft drinks and all sorts of sports drinks and teas, and I don't think I know anybody who doesn't consume some form of caffeine. It's everywhere, so even very small contribution to your health could translate to a big contribution over your lifetime. Evidence from observational studies supports an inverse association between coffee consumption and risk of type 2 diabetes, meaning more coffee, less diabetes. I don't know if it's that linear. Let's keep reading. In a dose-response meta-analysis, the risk of type 2 diabetes decreased by 7% for each cup per day increase of caffeinated coffee. So 14% for 2 cups, 21% for 3 cups. I find that very hard to believe, but even 7% decrease of risk of a fairly troubling disease, well, that's pretty good. And all you have to do is not stop drinking coffee. That's cool. Let's keep reading. So the authors go into details on their methodology and study. I'll summarize it with this. So some individuals carry genetic mutation that makes them metabolize caffeine slower. Individuals with this mutation are associated with higher plasma caffeine concentration, and on average will be exposed to higher caffeine concentrations throughout their life compared with people with variant associated with lower plasma caffeine. So basically, the authors take a database of genomic data, look for this particular mutation, and then look at the individual's, body mass index and risk of heart disease and diabetes. Very cool. Of course, I will leave a link to this paper down in the description. You really should read it yourself if you are at risk for one of these diseases. Make your own consumption. Don't let a talking head on YouTube make medical decisions for you. Anyway, so they analyzed data from almost 10,000 individuals of European ancestry. So this only applies to genes coming from people with European ancestry. Aha, so it applies to me, but not to everybody. That's good for me. The authors go into great details on their statistical analysis, as they should, and supplementary documents have even more information. You should check it out. Here, we're just going to ignore it. I'm going to assume they did everything well. And I like this note. We did not engage patients or members of the public when designing the study, interpreting the results, or drafting the manuscript. So basically, they took the data and didn't talk to anybody. So I'm assuming it's all ethical. I'm hoping it is. It probably is. Just, funny note here. And going into results, I think the figure speaks for itself. I think this is pretty much the only valuable figure in this paper, and it's really kind of cool. So we're looking at odds ratio ranging from 0.7 to 1.3, with 1 being in the middle. So I guess this is going from 30% less likely to get it to 30% more likely to get it. And individuals that consume coffee, they are pretty significantly less likely to get type 2 diabetes based on data from 3 different genomic databases. They are kind of less likely to suffer from ischemic heart disease, atrial fibrillation, with heart failure. Ouch. Well, when I drink way too much coffee, it doesn't feel right. So I'm kind of with this. So too much is too much, but a little bit is good. I guess that applies to everything in life. And there's a slightly decreased chance of stroke. That's very cool. The authors make a connection between caffeine effect on body mass index. So basically, reduced body mass index, you're skinnier, you're carrying less weight, you're carrying less of the complications associated with all of that. And that leads to decrease in type 2 diabetes development. And some of the effect is plasma caffeine directly affecting type 2 diabetes. And I believe the authors conclude that approximately half of the effect of caffeine on type 2 diabetes liability was estimated to be mediated through BMI reductions. So half does this directly and half goes through BMI reduction. Drink coffee, reduce body mass index, and risk of type 2 diabetes, or drink coffee and reduce only risk of type 2 diabetes. Well, I take either one. They both sound good, don't they? Authors mention biological mechanisms. So in terms of mechanisms, caffeine might reduce body mass index and fat mass by increasing thermogenesis and fat oxidation, burning fat faster. That's cool. A daily intake of 100 milligrams of caffeine has been estimated to increase energy expenditure by approximately 100 kilocalories, or 100 calories in a normal people speak, per day. So one beer is 100 calories, so I can have a coffee to counteract a beer. That is awesome. That is awesome. It is far more complex than that, as everything is in life, but just conceptually, this is really cool. I'm digging this. The authors mention strengths and limitations of the study, and I like this one. One of the limitations is that possible nonlinear relationships between plasma caffeine and outcomes could not be explored within the current 2-sample Mendelian randomization design. Yeah, sure. So you're looking at small daily intake of a chemical over a lifetime, the interaction between that chemical and your body is bound to be, it just has to be complex. So this study makes sort of an assumption that we're just going to ignore that and we're going to look at the total outcome. People who drink coffee, are they less likely or more likely to have diabetes? And it looks like less likely. That's a cool thing to know. And additionally, authors remind you that they're only studying persons of European ethnicity. So no idea what this study means for persons of non-European ethnicity. For me, this is good news. But for the rest of the world, further studies should continue, and funding of science should continue to understand even simple questions like this. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know down in the comments if you want to hear any other topics or there's special topics of interest to you. I have a couple of cool ones coming up that I'm going to enjoy reviewing. Anyway, peace. Till next time.